There is a word from the Lord on today. Scripture has already been read, but I want to hang my hat on verse number 3. Nehemiah 1, verse number 3. It simply says, I sent a message to them telling them I'm doing a great work. I cannot stop the work to come down and talk to you. For the next few moments, I want to talk about can't stop, won't stop. Can't stop, won't stop. When we read this life of Nehemiah, it's a very interesting story. And as I look across the room, I see these young people, I see a room full of leaders. And I believe Nehemiah on this morning will help encourage us. Because when God has a plan for your life, or when God has given you assignment, we have to be like Kodak Black and Sean P. Diddy Combs' son and can't stop, won't stop. Many of us might assume that life is going to be easy. But I came to tell you on this morning that it's a hard and intentional work. And just like Nehemiah, when we deal with life and go through life, we'll have to deal with the ruins and the rubble and the rumors that oftentimes invade our lives. If you're not familiar with the story, if you read chapter 3, we can see that they were doing the work. Chapter 4, 5, and 6, we see the opposition of the work. And we see that Nehemiah was trying to manage against the opposition that was in his way in order to get the work done. And I want to suggest to you on this morning that whenever you have a call from God, whenever God has assigned you to do something, there will be opposition. It may not always come the same way, but the opposition will come. Life get hard and life is hard, and none of us wants to go through the process of the hard times. Why have the promise and deal with the pain? And why have the blessings and have to deal with the burden? And that's the challenge that we have to deal with in this thing called life. But these moments of pain and these moments of opposition that we go through in life, it isn't there to stop our progress. It isn't meant to stop our progress. We have to look at the pain and the opposition and take it as an opportunity that just simply goes before us. And I'll say it again, church. Life isn't easy. Life is hard. And even though life isn't going to get any easier, the best way to navigate through this hard times is we have to learn how to handle harder better. And someone in this church on today, young or old, needs to receive that because God gives us the strength to handle harder better. And that's what we see here in our text on today in the life of Nehemiah. Chapter number 4, the enemy wanted to stop Nehemiah's progress. The enemy wanted to discourage and ridicule and intimidate him. But by the grace of God, we see that Nehemiah was able to navigate and survive the opposition in chapter 4. In chapter 5, the enemy realizes that he couldn't win from the outside. So guess what? They tried to win on the inside. And I've discovered that we're facing some of those hard times and challenges now in the church. We always have opposition inside of our church. And then I want to ask this question. What's the point of loving God and we hate our brother and sister that we work with? What's the point of honoring God and we can't honor those who we serve and who we work with? And Nehemiah will challenge all of us in here on tonight because we all can work on the wall, but still be guilty of treating others poorly. Now we're in Nehemiah chapter 6, and the enemy realizes we can't get them from the outside, neither can we get them from the inside. So they try to discourage Nehemiah to just get him to quit. Because if they can do that, then they know the work will stop. And that's a lesson for all of us in here on today, because I believe God is raising up some Nehemiahs in our churches and some leaders in the various places that we're in, leaders in our home and leaders on our jobs and leaders in our schools and our churches and community. And our prayer tonight when we go home, we should all pray to be like Nehemiah. But I need you to understand, when you pray that prayer, the higher you go, the higher God promotes you, the wider the target is on your back for the enemy. And that's what we see in our text here on today. The enemy realizes that if I can take Nehemiah out, then the work will not be able to start. But if we notice and if we look at the response of Nehemiah, even though he has opposition, even though he's dealing with problems, and even though the forces are trying to stop him, he declares that this work is too great. I'm not willing to come down. And what I appreciate about Nehemiah, with all that's going on around him, Nehemiah had this attitude that I can't stop and that I won't stop. And I'm not sure who this is for on today, but that's the kind of mindset and that's the kind of attitude that all of us should have. We should have the attitude that no matter what comes my way, I'm not going to stop the work that God has assigned to my hands. Why? Because I'm too close to quit. I'm too close to stop. I'm too close to give up. I'm too close to achieving what God has for me. And the enemy understands that you're too close to the finish line, and the enemy will try to do anything and do everything to get you off of the wall. Now, young people under the sound of my voice, I want to give you the playbook of the enemy. I want to show you what the enemy will do to get you off of the wall. And if I have time, I want to just give you some pointers how to maintain your position on the wall. We look at verses 1 through 4 in Nehemiah chapter 6. The first thing the enemy will try to do to you, the enemy will try to distract you. The Bible says that the enemy was trying to distract Nehemiah. It was these three men, Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, and their main intention was to stop the work at any cost, stop the building of the wall at any cost. They went from being enemies of Nehemiah to trying to be Nehemiah's friend. They literally sent Nehemiah messages saying, man, we see the work that you're doing. We want to help you out. We want to pitch in. We want to let you know that we're on your side. Nehemiah, we need to just meet up in the plains in the valley of Oh No. Meet us there. Let's sit down. Let's talk. Let's discuss on how this partnership can help you rebuild the wall. And church, I want to stop right there. You ought to be careful of the people who are against you in one chapter of your life and then want to be your friend in the next chapter of your life. And once somebody exposes their hand to you, guess what, baby? That's really who they are. And it's here in our text on today, they decide, since we tried everything else and he's not biting, let's just try something else. Let's try to be cool with Nehemiah. Let's try to be friends with Nehemiah. We'll tell Nehemiah that we're good, we're buddies. But notice how their plan was set up. They wanted Nehemiah to leave the work, leave the walls of Jerusalem, and go to the valley of Oh No. Now, the valley of Oh No was about 25 miles away from Jerusalem, so it was going to take some time for Nehemiah to get there. It was going to take him away from the work that God has called Nehemiah to do. They were trying to separate Nehemiah from the wall. They were trying to separate Nehemiah from the work. And if they could have took Nehemiah away from the work, then guess what? The people that was working with him could have been vulnerable and attacked. And even if Nehemiah would have went to the valley in the plains of Oh No, he could have been killed or assassinated. But Nehemiah understood that they were trying to distract him and separate him from the work that God has placed in his hands. And I came to tell you on this morning, church, that the work deserves your full attention. Don't be fooled by going to the valley of Oh No. so, because the enemy knows that if I can separate you from the work that you're called to do, if I can put some distance between you and the work, then you can easily be defeated. But Nehemiah understood where his value and his protection was. His value and protection was doing the work that God has called him to do. And you can't afford in this season of your life to be distracted because you're too close to give up now. Church, young people, don't allow the enemy to distract you. And we have to understand when you read this text that, their plan was consistent. This distraction was sent 4 different times. The Bible says that they sent messages to Nehemiah on 4 different occasions. And 4 times Nehemiah responded, I ain't got time for that. I ain't got time for that. I can't stop the work that God has called for me to do. It would have been bad if they just would have attempted once or twice. But they kept trying over and over and over again. And some of you in here on today knows what it's like for the enemy to constantly try to distract you from the work that God has called you to do. They just don't come one time, they come multiple times, and they'll show up to try to get you off of the wall. But I need some people in here on today that's willing to raise their hands and say, I can't leave the wall now. I can't leave this work because the distraction isn't worth the separation. They try to distract Nehemiah. Young people, listen to this. Not only did they try to distract Nehemiah, if you look at verses 5 through 9, Sanballat realizes that he can't be Nehemiah's friend, that being his friend wasn't working. So now they try to discredit Nehemiah. They try to discredit Nehemiah. He said, man, me trying to take him to the valley of Ono didn't work. So the Bible says that Sanballat sends an open letter that everybody can see. He sent something and made a post on social media. And the message says, Nehemiah, we know what you're trying to do. You're trying to make the prophets anoint you as king over Jerusalem. And we're going to tell the king and we're going to tell the rest of the people that you're money hungry, that you're just simply power thirsty, that all you want is a position. And that's the only reason why you're trying to do the work. You just want people and somebody to call you king. And this is major because they sent this letter and everything in the letter was full of lies. It was wrong. It was rumors. It was gossip. And they were trying to get the people to turn against Nehemiah. They realized if I can put this lie out on this man, if I can discredit him, then guess what? The work will stop. And that's how the enemy works, young people. The enemy says, let me put a rumor out on them, so hopefully they'll be able to get in all these other people's head, even if they don't know you personally. But if I can cause you to lose your level of influence, if I can cause people to turn their back on you, guess what? The work will stop. And the story of Nehemiah shows us that not only will the enemy try to distract you, but they will discredit you. They'll throw out and spread lies all on your name. And the impact is they know they can't take your gift away from you. They know they can't take your talent away from you. But if we discredit your name and diminish your influence, then guess what? The enemy will win. And they want people to turn on Nehemiah. They wanted the king to turn on Nehemiah. And watch this. All the lies that they put on Nehemiah, Nehemiah felt the pain because they were lying on him. They were downplaying his name. Even after all of that, Nehemiah didn't argue. He doesn't make his own post on social media. But what does Nehemiah do? Over there in verse number 9, he prayed and asked God to strengthen his hand. Now Nehemiah understands, and I need you to understand, young people, that you can't track down every rumor and every lie. When those things happen to you, you have to just build up your own character and build up your integrity. Because people are going to lie, and people are going to believe the lie even if they don't know you. They're going to believe a lie just because it's a lie. But you have to learn how to stand on your truth, because the truth will prevail at the end. And I know some of you have been discredited on your job, in your school, in your church, but stand on your truth. I know some of you have been discredited by some of the people sitting on your row, or some of the people that's living in your house, but I came to tell you, just stand on your truth. In verses 1 through 4, they try to discredit Nehemiah. Verses 1 through 4, they try to distract Nehemiah. Verses 5 through 9, they try to discredit Nehemiah. We look at verses 10 through 14. They try to deceive Nehemiah. It was this man by the name of Shemaiah, Delilah's son. He was a prophet. He calls Nehemiah's house, and he says, Nehemiah, come to my house. And when he comes to Nehemiah's house, he had this plan drawn up. This prophet, this religious man, tells Nehemiah, I got word that they're trying to kill you. Matter of fact, not only are they trying to kill you, but they're trying to kill you tonight. So I came up with this plan. Why don't you and I go to the temple? Let's hide behind the locked doors. Because if we get into the temple and hide behind the locked doors, nobody will be able to touch you. Just come with me. God told me to tell you this, Nehemiah. Trust me. He said, I heard from the Lord. Just trust me. Nehemiah saw right through his foolishness. Because Nehemiah, he knew the law. He knew the Torah. He knew what it said concerning lay members and lay people, those that weren't anointed and appointed to work inside the temple. It was only certain areas that they can go into. And here it is, this false prophet was trying to take him to one of those places that he wasn't allowed to go. Nehemiah wasn't ordained for that place to be behind the locked doors. In other words, if Nehemiah would have done that, Nehemiah could have been killed and lost the confidence of his people. But this false prophet was just simply trying to deceive Nehemiah. But Nehemiah had enough discernment to know when he was being deceived and when he wasn't. And church, that's why it's very important for us to have a prayer life. That's why it's very important for us to read our Bible and to study our Bible so we can know when somebody is trying to deceive us. Because Nehemiah knew the law for himself. Nehemiah said, man, you ain't talking for God. You're speaking for Sanballat, Tobiah. You're speaking for the enemy. And I can tell who you are because this didn't come from God. Nehemiah understood that it was nothing more than deception. They tried to distract, discredit, and deceive Nehemiah. But when we close out chapter 6, they even tried to have some people on the inside. A man who was a family member of the people who worked for Nehemiah. They were even deceitful in their support to Nehemiah. They smiled in his face. And when he turned his back, they was ready to stab him in his back. But despite the distraction, despite being discredited, despite the deception, the Bible says that the work was complete in a record of 52 days. And I need you to understand that when God is on your side, when God is pushing you and pulling you, he will allow you to do some stuff that others think can't be accomplished. When God is on your side, he'll put some super on your natural, and you can complete the assignment that God has placed in front of you. Even when opposition rise, even when troubles rise, even when others don't want to help you, guess what? You will still be able to complete the work because God has placed that assignment on your life. And just like Nehemiah, you need to refuse not to stop the work. You need to refuse to be fearful of the enemy. You should refuse to fall down to the enemy's level because God has called you to do a mighty good work, and you have to have the attitude that I can't stop and I won't stop. The Bible says the work was done. And some of you might be in here, and I told you I wanted to tell you what the enemy will do. Tell you how to stay on the wall. Because this opposition wasn't easy. It was a mighty hard work, but guess what? God was with him. Nehemiah, I didn't say it in the beginning, but Nehemiah was a cupbearer. And here it is, this cupbearer who had never built anything a day in his life, helped lead these people to build the wall in a record 52 days. And I want to share this with you on this morning. And if you have a pen and pencil, I want you to take it down or go back at your live and watch this, because not just for young people in school, but this will help some of us grown folks too. How to be leaders and how not to stop the work that God has called us to do. The first thing we must do, we must remember that our commitment to the work must be greater than the criticism. Church, you will always be criticized. No matter what you do, good or bad, people are going to talk about you. It's just part of life. But your commitment to the work has to be greater than the criticism that you're up against. It's the commitment to your grades. It's the commitment to your job. It's the commitment to starting that business. It's the commitment to getting that college degree that pushes you and drives you. When you have that greater commitment, it will push you past the criticism. Now, I'm not saying that the criticism isn't going to hurt. It's going to hurt. But our commitment must be greater than the pain that you feel when they criticize you. And you must know and trust God will guide you and pull you through it. And you have to realize that your commitment is more valuable than anything anybody can say about you. Not only must your commitment be greater than the criticism, but you have to realize that your assignment is greater than being annoyed. Once God places something for you to do, every assignment God gives you isn't going to be peaches and cream. Every assignment God gives you isn't going to be fine and dandy. Some of the assignments that God places on your life going to have some rough patches. You're going to want to give up and throw in the towel. But guess what? Being annoyed doesn't negate the fact that you still have an assignment from God. I love young people. I love my church. I love preaching. But some days, I don't feel like it because I'm annoyed, because I'm frustrated, because I'm tired. I'm 45 years old. I've never been to a Sunday brunch. Some Sundays, I just want to go to brunch with my family. But that still doesn't negate the fact of me accepting the assignment that God has called me to do. Because God has placed an assignment on my life to deposit something in people's lives that will help them along the way. But even though I'm annoyed, even though I'm frustrated, even though I'm tired, I still have to manage being annoyed, because at the end of the day, my assignment is more important. And just like Nehemiah, he understood that his assignment was greater than being annoyed. If you know this story, you got tired of hearing about Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem. But at the end of the day, he overcame the annoyance to complete his assignment. I'm done. This is the last one. Cut across the field. Bid y'all good day. We can all go have Popeye's chicken together. You have to have this can't stop, won't stop attitude. You have to stay committed to the work because the commitment is greater than being the criticism. The assignment must be greater than the annoyance. And lastly, your passion has to be greater than your problems. The Bible says that the walls were completed in a record of 52 days. What caused this man who had just a cupbearer, who had never built nothing a day in his life, to complete this wall in 52 days? We go back to chapter 1, it was because he had a passion. God gave him a passion to do the work. God gave him a desire to do the work. And that passion, that desire allowed him to see it through and to complete the work in chapter 6. Now, if Nehemiah didn't have this passion, then guess what? The assignment would have never been completed. And I want to challenge all of you in here on today. Young people, ask God to help you find and discover your passion. Because when you find your passion, it will give you the greatness that you will need to be able to finish the assignment. When you tap into your passion, it'll allow you to focus on the work that God gave you to do. And I tell my young people all the time, just don't do stuff just because that's what your parents want you to do or because everybody else wants you to do it, but find your passion. Because when you have passion, guess what? You ain't going to want to quit or give up. Because when problems will arise in your life, when you're doing the work that God calls you to do, Brother Kenny, guess what? If you have the passion, you'll be able to look those problems in the face and say, I can't stop. I won't stop because God has called me to do something. God bless you.